Hello, my name is Jeff Tipping. I was until recently the Director of Coaching of the National Soccer Coaches Association. I am a member of the United States Soccer Federation instructional staff, and in 1998 I was a guest assistant coach for the United States Women's National Team. In 1996 and in 1998 I had the pleasure of watching the French national team play in Euro 96 in England and also in France in the 1998 World Cup. The ideas and the system we're going to talk about today is an analysis of the French system, which was 4-3-3, and also I'd like to introduce some exercises, attacking exercises, that may help the coach implement the French national team system, which of course was very successful during the World Cup of 1998. First, I'd like to talk about the French national team players and how they fit into that system on the chalkboard behind me. The French national team system was a 4-3-3. It was a 4-3-3 with a flat back four and three central midfield players and three, let's just call them centre forward types. This 4-3-3, it was the first time I'd ever seen a 4-3-3 played in this way. The major characteristic of the French 4-3-3, other than the usual flat back four which most international teams play, was the fact that their three midfield players and their three front runners all played basically within the width of the penalty box. And so consequently the French played with a block of six, once again within the width of the penalty box, about 44 yards wide. They very rarely went into wide positions. The width was provided by the French fullbacks, the left back Thuram and the right back Carambeau, who came forward into these open positions, almost becoming wingers. So let's just look at the system itself and some of the characteristics of it. First and foremost, the system is a system I will call a system of wingerless wonders. The width, which you now normally associate with the 4-3-3, which would come in these forward wide positions, comes again with the outside backs. The players up in front, they stay fairly narrow. Consequently, we have a block of six players here with open gaps on the flanks, which these outside backs are going to advance into. They almost become wingers, and in the French system, they provide most of the crosses that come into the penalty box. We have a central midfield screen for the French national team. It is Deschamps, very, very talented central midfield player. When these two outside backs go forward and these midfield players push forward, Deschamps is always the one, together with the two centre backs, which in 1998 was Desailly and Blanc. They will provide a defensive triangle to prevent counterattacks. Deschamps always played behind the midfield players and himself provided a lot of the balls that were played long and diagonally into those wide central spaces. One of the benefits of playing with a block of six for the French was that they always had players in central positions whenever the ball broke down. One of the most dangerous moments in international football is when you lose possession of the ball. Because in most systems of play, when you have possession of the ball, the wide players go into wide positions, tends to leave the middle of the field exposed. Because the French never sent players into wide positions, when they did lose possession of the ball, they always had numbers centrally, and they were able to deflect attacking movements into wide positions. So they very rarely were counterattacked upon because of the large number of players that they had in central positions defensively. The front three were always a menace to opposing teams, especially so many international teams that play with a 3-5-2. Teams that play with three players at the back in a 3-5-2, all of a sudden these three back players had to deal with three very talented forwards. And they would have to adjust their system of play. Sometimes they'd have to go from playing a 3-5-2 maybe to dropping another player back alongside the back three to deal with these three centre forwards. When they lost the ball, these three front runners were able to put a lot of pressure on the opposing team, especially if they played in a 3-5-2 or even if they played in a 4-4-2. Another benefit is that whenever the ball was won, especially in the midfield area, there was always close support. Frequently, when you're under pressure in international football, you're not able to play the ball forward very quickly because of pressure. When Deschamps was able to get the ball, Petit or Diomede, if they couldn't play the ball forward quickly, they always had players in close diagonal positions or back positions that they could play the ball to quickly to relieve pressure so that they could go forward. By playing a series of very short passes in the middle of the field, the French were able to pull an opposing team centrally. By pulling an opposing team centrally with a lot of central combinations and central passes, by pulling teams together centrally, they open up the flanks for these players to come in from deep positions. And you would frequently see a series of diagonal passes, lateral running, forcing an opponent to defend closer and closer to the central part of the field, and then balls will be played out into these channels as these flank players came through from deep positions. This block of 6 was also able to defend very well indeed. Once again, even against the 3-5-2, if I just remove these lines here, even against the 3-5-2, this block of 6 was able to force the ball wide. They would slide across, and if a ball was able to get played over the top, they were able to slide across very quickly. If they couldn't get there, Thuram would slide up, the 3 fullbacks would slide across, Thuram would slide up, they would slide across, and Diomede or Deschamps was able to hold and cover that weak side. So this system, which was a very unusual system, certainly the first time I'd ever seen a 4-3-3 played quite this way, was very successful at the international level. At the international level, the big question is always what if? And international coaches understand that the what if question is, what if we lose the ball right now? In international football, losing the ball, losing possession of the ball is a critical moment. The French national team system answered the question of what if. What if we lose the ball right now? They always had players in central positions, and attacking teams very rarely were able to counterattack against this French system of play. Let's just take a look for a few seconds and look at the French 4-3-3 against a couple of different systems, which I've already mentioned in the 3-5-2. Most teams that play with a 3-5-2, they would play flat with either a deep central midfield player and 2 high midfield players, or 2 deep central midfield players and 1 high midfield player. Against the 3-5-2, most 3-5-2 teams play with players in very wide positions, right and left, 3 central midfield players, and the traditional 3-5-2 with a centre forward. The problem that 3-5-2 teams had against the French, well, number one, these 3 players are extremely talented, as are these 3 players, especially this player Zidane, who actually played a little bit deeper frequently in that position there, almost like a 4-3-1-2. The opponents had to deal with these 3 players, and not many international teams are willing to play 3 versus 3 against 3 of the most talented players in the world, which were Djorkaeff for the French, Zidane, and over on this side, Trezeguet, I believe is the French pronunciation. These players were not really a threat. Although they were in these deep wide positions here, the ball would be forced into these wide positions, and the French midfield players would simply slide across and to contain. This player would come back in here if necessary, and if necessary, this French player would come back, but not very much. They were willing to allow teams to play the ball over the top to these players, but in actual fact, it very rarely happened because the French were able to get so much pressure on the ball in these flank spaces that they were not really exploited. So the 3-5-2, most teams that played a 3-5-2 had to adjust to the French because the French had the talented players right in the middle of the field. And when you have all of your talented players right in the middle of the field, it creates a major problem for teams who were playing with only 3 at the back. Teams that played a 4-4-2, well, depending on how they played the 4-4-2, most teams that played a 4-4-2 would find themselves outnumbered in the middle of the field. 4 players at the back, 4 players in the midfield, and then 2 centre forwards. These 2 players in central midfield would find themselves outnumbered against these 3 central well, let's just call them a right central midfield player, a central midfield player, and a left centre midfield player. This is Diomede Deschamps, very, very talented central midfield player, and this was Petit, quite a bit of the time. Sometimes Vieira would come in and play this position here. So the 4-4-2 would have to adjust, and they normally would bring in these players into these deep positions to try and provide cover. And what that would do is that would open up these flanks then for these outside backs to come into. As these outside backs for the opposition pull into these positions here to try and deal with these 3 French runners, it opens up even more space for these players to come into, or occasionally for a flank run from a central midfield player from here or in here. So you did see these runs occasionally, but most of the runs came from this player and also from this player. So that was it, a very talented block of 6 players here, 2 pillars in the middle of the defense, Desailly and Blanc, and 2 very fine attacking outside backs who became almost wingers when in possession of the ball. So what I'd like to do is just show you some exercises that we use when we play out of this system, and that maybe you can use with your team to try and encourage your players to develop a number of different characteristics. The characteristics that we'd like to encourage from teams playing mostly involve the work of the 3 midfield players, the 3 forwards, and the 2 outside backs. We are not going to deal with the 2 centre backs because our topic is attacking, it's not defending. And so we're not going to worry about those two centre backs. But just remember that those 2 centre backs and Deschamps, they always stay home to provide a triangle of 3 whenever these 2 outside backs go forward. So the exercises that we're going to show you deal with the work of these 8 players. Right back, left back, 3 centre midfield players, middle, left, right, and these 3 centre forwards. One of the characteristics of this group here is that they run laterally across the field. When teams run laterally across the field, defending players have a tendency to move laterally. This lateral movement this way opens up space here. So by running across the field that way, by somehow reversing the pass there, we're able to get this player in. So the exercises I'm going to be showing are exercises which involve lateral movement across the field, frequently with the ball played into the centre forwards. When the ball gets played into the centre forwards, the opposing defence has to collapse centrally, and then somehow the ball is played out to a flank player, to these outside flank players coming in into these open spaces. Consequently, we're looking for a number of central passes or central or lateral running will collapse the defence centrally, then we play the ball into the flanks for the outside backs coming through. With a warm-up, these players here just running across the field and laterally across the field and practicing takeovers. When a player runs across the field in this way, the defense shifts across. And what I noticed with the French national team, they did a great deal of either taking over, so run across the field, take over, play the ball into this space, run across the field, back heel, play the ball into this space, or run across the field, play the ball here, and then play the ball into that space. Always to an outside back coming through from this position. Warm up, running across the field laterally to practice takeovers. Running across the field laterally, then back heel to a player to play the ball to that line. Running across the field, playing the ball to a player here who immediately plays the ball back to that line there. So consequently, we come across the field laterally, Play the ball, then play the ball back into the space. Trying to develop movement, going across the field, and then reverse passing into the space. Yeah, it's important in all warm-up exercises, especially shadow exercises, if the point of reference is the goal, that on takeovers, the ball is always taken on the foot away from where the defender would be. We're looking to back heel the ball. Same idea, reverse direction. It's not a takeover, it's a back heel. Try and get that right. Take the foot away from the goal, please, Topper. That would be your left foot. Take over away from the goal. This is an exercise to get the players to pass the ball, and because they are running laterally across the field, the defenders will be moving laterally with them, and then we reverse the ball into the space that they've left with a quick pass. Try and take the ball on the outside, please. We do a number of those exercises, and then we go to what we call choreographed exercises. We'll have 2 or 3 players in those positions, which are marked by cones. This player, who's the central midfield player, will play the ball to this flank player. The flank player is always encouraged to look across the field, because what we want to try and do is hit diagonal passes to diagonal runners. When this player hits the ball to this player, that is a diagonal pass. This player is able to receive the ball facing in that direction. If this player comes across, brings an imaginary defender with him, then we're able to slip a player into that position and we're able to play the ball into that space. So I'm just showing you a series of exercises to try and get this player and this player into these spaces here from a deep position. I will be showing you a number of very, very carefully and elaborately choreographed movements without any opposition, which involve players in these 6 positions. Players running across the field, take over, players, balls being played into this space. Players running across the field, take over, balls being played into that space. One of the qualities of diagonal passing is that it makes the defenders shift in a direction. And then what we're trying to do is play the ball into the space on the weak side of wherever they were. So we bring the ball across the field and now play the ball into the space. So what we're looking to do here is get the 2 outside midfield players in the 4-3-3, get the 2 outside midfield players in on the weak side of the defense. And you can begin to put a couple of defenders in there if necessary to try and deal with it. But for the moment, we're just going to work on the shadow play. Brilliantly ball. Timing of the runs in the penalty box, well, that is something which needs some development and refinement. For the moment, what we're trying to do is just trying to work on trying to get balls into those midfield players coming in from those deep positions. Now we move on to the next set of exercises. The next set of exercises, we put a channel from the corner of the penalty box to the halfway line, a channel to the halfway line, then we're going to put a halfway line across. The team that we are working with, in other words, our starting team, for example, they will be in this half of the field, and you'll use the 3 midfield players and the 3 centre forwards, 6 against 3 or maybe 6 versus 4 opponents. The X's actually have 6 players, but 2 of them wait in this half of the field. In an area about 20 by 40, these 6 players, circle players, are going to try and keep the ball away from these 4 X's. The 6 circle players have to try and support each other. It's a fairly tight space, but this is how the French play in a fairly tight space, with 3 central midfield players and these 3 front runners. When these X's win the ball, they immediately turn and play the ball over this line to their teammates who are waiting. Then as soon as they've done that, they will all run over into that half of the field, together with 3 circle players, to make 6 versus 3 in the other half of the field. 3 of the O players now wait. Now what we're looking for is when these, 4 of the O players will go across and 2 will wait. You might want to start off with doing 6 versus 3 to make it a bit easier for the attackers. But let's say we go to 6 versus 4. Now what I'm interested in is what the O players do, what the circle players do when they win the ball. Because the French national team are superb on the counter-attack. When the circle players win the ball, we're looking to play the ball in immediately to their 2 resting players and then sprint and come and support, and 3 X players come down, or 4 X players come down, and then make a 6 versus 4 in this area over here. So that is a fine game for trying to develop close control, composure on the ball, 6 versus 4 in a fairly tight space, the 6 attacking players having to play on a great deal of pressure from those 4 defending players. And then the emphasis when you are defending on the moment of transition of winning the ball, playing the ball across to your waiting partners, and then most importantly, going to support them. 6 versus 3 in a space about 40 yards by 40 yards, divided by a halfway line. The yellows try and keep possession of the ball away from the reds. 6 versus 3. Begin with 6 versus 3 with 3 defenders and 3 teammates waiting on the other side of the halfway line. When the 3 reds win the ball, they have to play the ball to their teammates on the other side of the halfway line. I always start off with 6 versus 3. If it's too easy for the yellows, then we either limit the number of touches they have or we increase the number of players. The ball gets played over the halfway line, and now the 3 reds have to try and do the same thing. What we're practicing here, 2 main things. One is trying to get the reds to play composed in a fairly tight area. Of course, the more players I put in for the yellows, for the defenders, the tighter the area becomes. That's the first thing, is composure in a tight space. The second idea is as soon as the defenders win the ball, is to make a transition play as quickly as they can. We then move on to an exercise which is the same kind of exercise, 6 versus 4. Except now we introduce 2 wide players for the O's. We ask those players in here to put 5 passes together, or 8 passes together, depending on what you want. Once they put 4 or 5, 6 passes together, whatever condition you set, then they are allowed to play the ball out to these players coming in from deep positions. When these balls get played out to these flank players, either right or left, then they attack the goal. All the players attack the goal, and the X players can defend. After every repetition, the coach always starts with the ball down here. All the players will come back to a starting position, and we'd play 6 versus 4 again. It's vital at this particular stage that you begin to talk about 2 important elements. One element is that this outside back and this outside back must hold their position and not get in too early. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to force the opposition centrally, then we play the ball out to this space for these players. Once we get to a game, if this player gets in too soon and receives the ball standing, it's too easy for these players to slide across and close them down. So what we want to encourage these outside backs to do is to hold their position at the halfway line until the ball is played out. Then they go and they're able to receive the ball on a sprint before the ex-players can slide across and try and defend. So that's the first thing that we're trying to get across in this exercise. The second thing we're trying to get across in this exercise is the quality of the pass. I prefer players on this side to pass the ball to this player, and players on this side to pass the ball to this player, for this simple reason. When the ball is on this side of the midfield area, any defenders are going to, in a game, slide across, so their weakness will be here. So players from this side should be encouraged to play the ball there. Players from this side should be encouraged to play the ball there. The kind of pass is critical. We're looking for these players to hit a pass, number one, into space, and number two, if possible, bending that way so this player can take it on a sprint before these players can slide across. So this is 6 versus 4 with 2 players coming from deep positions. We're asking these players to hold, and we're asking these players to hit a quality ball into the path of these players so they can take the ball on a sprint and then swing the ball across. Play.
Other way. Yep. Yeah. Other way. Yep. Here we go. Put it. Back to me. Back. Start it wide. Sean's on. Bobby. Hit him.
Good.
In the box.
Okay, now what we're training is the outside backs to come in from those deep positions. The French have 2 outstanding fullbacks that they play in from very deep positions. And the first thing that we need to try and do, however, is get some possession in the central area. Getting possession of the ball in the central area forces the opposition to collapse centrally and opens up space on the flanks to play in our outside backs.
Come on.
That's 4.
Wait,
Play on. Good. That's all right. Long preparation. Now when the outside back gets the ball, wants to swing the ball across as quickly as possible so that those players can come in. Play. One more. Can you switch it? And stop and hold. And hold. Okay. Now in this position here, where do you think I want Smudgy to hit it? I want Smudgy to hit it there. Because when the ball's over on this side, what's the defense going to do? They're going to shift across. And when the defense shift across, that's the pass that we're trying to make. That's why when the ball's on this side, we're trying to hit that guy. When the ball's on that side, we're trying to hit that guy. That's why it's important to have a left footer there. So this is one of the characteristics of this system. The fullbacks provide most of the crosses. And for the French national team, they have Thuram on one side, Lizarazu on the other side, both outstanding fullbacks, but most importantly, both outstanding attacking players, almost like wingers. We then move on to the 8 versus 6 exercise, and the 6, as well as being outnumbered, they do have a goalkeeper. We're attacking a central goal. It's important that the players that you're working with have the outside backs basically pushed up alongside these 3 central midfield players, and of course the 3 centre forwards are ahead. It's important also that the defenders are outnumbered, because what we're trying to do in this exercise is get the defenders to slide over to one side of the field and then change the point of attack over to the other side of the field. And that happens a lot easier when the defenders are outnumbered. So to get success with this particular exercise, it's important to be 8 versus 6, maybe 8 versus 7. If you're coaching maybe 15-year-olds, maybe 8 versus 5 might be the better way to do it. Once again, we're asking this block of 6 to try and pass the ball centrally. And I try and encourage players to play the ball into centre forwards whenever they can. The reason I want them to play the ball into centre forwards is that once the balls get played into these 3 centre forwards, once again they try and stay within the width of the penalty box. when they play the ball to these centre forwards, the opposing defenders tend to bunch in centrally to try and shut off the threat of a central strike because the ball's in the central position. By coming tight and concentrating themselves centrally, they open up these spaces here. So the perfect scenario in this kind of a game would be a ball played in here, this player shows a ball played here, the ball played into that space with that player coming up from a deep position, and then we get into the penalty box for the crosses. So when you're teaching this particular sequence here, try and encourage the players to get the ball into these players here before they play the ball out wide. The other important moment in this exercise is when the ball gets played backwards. Normally when a ball gets played backwards to a player at a halfway line, it's being played backwards to a player who's not under pressure. When a player is not under pressure, he's able to get the range and the angle to play a long ball into these spaces. So the two key moments you're looking for in this exercise is when a ball is played into these centre forwards here and the defence compresses centrally. The other key moment is when the ball is played back, because that's when the ball can be played into these spaces. Again, when the ball gets played over here, I like the ball played from this midfield player to that fullback and from this midfield player to that fullback. Again, we try and encourage these players to hold their position so that when they do go, they're able to go on a sprint. They don't have to wait for the ball to arrive. If they get in too early, they may end up standing and waiting, and the midfield players who are defending can slide across. Leave that space alive. When the ball arrives, the player arrives on the sprint, one touch, and cross the ball. If they can get to the goal line, then that's a bonus. The team who are defending, they have two counter-attack goals they can go to. So now we kind of give them a reward. If they win the ball, they can play to those counter-attack goals. So you literally have a game going here in two directions, involving 14 players and the goalkeeper. This exercise is 8 versus 6, which means 3 midfield players for the yellow, 3 forwards for the yellow, 3 centre forwards for the yellow, and the 2 outside backs who come in from deep positions out on the flanks. They are playing against 6 red players, 3 fullbacks, 3 midfield players, and it's important that you begin this exercise playing probably 8 versus 6 so that the 3 red midfield players get pulled over to one side, which allows the outside fullback to get in from a deep position. We've introduced counter-attack goals, so it's much more like a game. And at this stage of the exercise, the coach should be looking for chances for the yellow team, the attacking team, to play the ball into the wide spaces. And hold! Play! It's a great ball. Now the midfield player is able to take it in stride. Quality of the cross, well, not as good as we'd like, but we're certainly getting into good positions in this exercise. Notice how the red defenders become very, very centralized after the yellow team puts 3 or 4 passes together. Yes, that's a great ball into the midfield, from the midfield player to the outside fullback coming in from a deep position. Oh. And another chance goes wasted. The French don't miss those chances very often. We next move to another exercise which is fairly similar to the one we just showed you previously. It's 8 versus 6, or 8 versus 5 sometimes is helpful, plus the goalkeeper. However, the team that you are working with, the circle team, with the outside backs, they have 2 large goals to score on. They have this goal, round about the corner of the penalty box and the goal line, and another full-size goal over here. This goalkeeper has to try and cover both goals, and consequently we're trying to encourage the circle team to get the ball over to one side, and with the ball over to one side, the goalkeeper begins to move across almost like a sweeper might do in a regular game. And once we get the goalkeeper to move across, we either change the point of attack directly to the other side, or we bring the ball back and change the point of attack to the player who can then attack this goal. This is an excellent game for trying to get players to think in terms of the movement of the sweeper. And those of you who are coaching high school will probably play against a lot of sweeper systems. This is a great game. Think of the goalkeeper as the sweeper. Get the goalkeeper to one side of the field, and then once we get the goalkeeper and the defenders slid across to this side of the field, now the ball can come back, be changed to this outside back coming through, and that's how the French get so many of their breakthroughs on the flanks, is by a number of passes on one side of the field. By passing the ball on one side of the field, you force the opposition to slide across the cover. Then we bring the ball back, a very important moment in the game when the ball is played back. Then it gets changed over the other side to this player. Again, it needs to be 8 versus 6. With advanced players, it can become 8 versus 7, or actually 8 against 8. Just to remind you that we've left out the 2 centre-backs for the attacking team because we're only looking at the attacking functions of the outside backs, 3 midfield players and 3 centre forwards, because this is an attacking session. Just notice the way the whole team collapses essentially whenever the ball goes to the centre forward. Whenever the opponents collapse central, that opens up the flanks for the outside players to come through, and that is the purpose of the exercise. The ball must go into the central players to force the opposing defenders to collapse centrally. That's when the flanks open up. If the defenders don't collapse centrally, then that leaves space in the middle of the field for the attacking players to exploit. I like to take this game up to an 8 versus 8 game, and the goalkeeper is an extra player for the defending team or the team that you want to try and attack against. The attacking team, the team that you're working with, doesn't play with a goalkeeper but has 2 counter-attack goals which the defending team can counter-attack to. Hit Vernon. Yes, good, excellent. Good, well done, Albie. Bringing the ball across the field. Just a couple of things for coaches to be aware of when they try and develop attacking in the 11v11. We're going to do 11 with no opposition. There is sometimes a problem, and the French would have this problem, because they do keep so many players compact centrally. The French have a problem when the ball goes to either this player in a deep position or this player in a deep position. The problem is that the only passing option for these 2 players is from outside to in. Lots of international coaches will be very cautious about having their outside backs play the ball from the outside of the field to the inside of the field. But because of the French system, those passes frequently are the only passes available. My feeling on the subject is that these 2 players here and these 2 players here become vital players in this kind of a system. This player's responsibility when this player has the ball is to get wide out to that line, because we need to have an outside pass available. We need to have an outside pass available. That opens up a passing lane possibly to that player. If that player's midfield player goes with him, that passing lane opens up. If the midfield player stays, then that passing option opens up. So it's critical that this player and this player go wide when the outside back has the ball. As the ball gets played into the centre forward, this centre forward checks to the ball, this centre forward can go behind, so that the player with the ball has either a pass into feet, a pass into space, and as that player makes their run, this player makes their run, we could possibly have a pass over the top. Because of this player's run, if a pass goes into the centre forward, we ask this player to come across, and the ball can be laid back and then played into that space for this midfield player, or possibly this outside back coming forward. Or, as the ball gets played into the centre forward spins inside and hits that player, or hits the ball to the outside back coming forward. All of this happens because what is actually a central midfield player, goes into this wide position. Now, obviously, the problem in this system right now, the way the French play, is that any ball played to the outside back has to come in. It is the duty of the centre forward to look at the inside, to look at the right midfield player to see whether that player is giving us width. Now, when that ball comes over to that wide player there, wide right player there, Garrett, you try and get against the touch line. All right, so get it right against the touch line. Okay, good. So you're going to provide us width. That leaves the passing angle into Whitey. All right, now as the ball comes in from Topper to Whitey, go on, play it. Good, and hold. The ball can be played back to Smudge there, who can change the point of attack. Now, when the ball is over on this side, Shane, Les, you must be pulled in. When Smudge comes across, you get pulled in. When that ball comes back to Smudge, maybe we can play the ball over there. All right? Vernon, you can come towards Smudge, or you can make a run towards the corner flag. If you make a run towards the corner flag, Albie, you can either follow him, or you can come towards the ball for a ball played into feet, and then you hit Garrett. All right? So, the important thing, however, is that when the ball gets to Topper, that Garrett gets nice and wide. Hit Les, hit Les. It's a great ball. The other option, if this midfield player, either because he's just not in the right position to get wide, or because his defensive duties have pulled him inside too much, if this centre forward looks down and he sees that they have no width, it's the responsibility of this centre forward to try and give width and possibly go back down the line. When that centre forward makes that run in there, opens up a space for this centre forward to come into, and this centre forward to make that diagonal run behind. Any ball played in here should be played back to these players who are facing forward for a ball played into this player here, or possibly played across the field for that outside back coming in from behind. So once again, the problem in the formation is that all passes from these players here will tend to have to go from out to in, which in international football can be very hazardous. So we have to have a configuration, or we have to have some kind of a system here to get somebody into a wide position to open up those passing lanes and giving us width. The responsibility of this player and this player is to look at the movement of this player and this player. When the outside back gets the ball, if that player hasn't gone out there to the touch line, then that player has to go out to the touch line. When that player goes out to the touch line, this player slides into this space. This player goes in behind. So Top, you have a ball played into Whitey in a wide position, Vernon checking to you, or I'll be going in behind. All right? If the ball comes back to Vernon and then comes back to Garrett, I want to see the ball changed over to the other side to Topper coming in. All right? Now in the French system, we don't have big gaps in the middle like this. So when the ball goes over to that side, you come in, Les. Because what we're worried about is if we give the ball away in the central position here, is the threat of the counter-attack in the middle. So when Smudge moves across, you move across. All right? Same thing on the other side, Garrett. When Les goes across, then you come across. And all of our penetration on the flanks is going to come from the outside backs. Good ball. That's a great ball. Yeah. Off you go.
Go wide. Yeah, that's too wide. Good. Come to left. Come to left. Come to left. Come to left. Come to. Yes. Yes. Good start. That's it. Rock.
All right, well done. Play, open up. Good. Yeah. Take 2 touches. Can you send him? Good. Play. Move forward. Play. Wide. Well done. Show. Show. Good. Forward, forward. Squeeze. Well played. Let's have the last one. Take a touch. Good. Try and finish off with the goal. Yes. Well, that basically is a synopsis of the French national team 4-3-3. And I certainly hope that you've enjoyed this video. And I hope that you've enjoyed some of the exercises that we do here at our college to try and incorporate ourselves into that system. System's only as good as the players. But the important consideration to grasp is that your players have to complement the system. The French are successful because they have two outside backs who are Olympic sprinters and also tremendous attacking players. Even though they line up as defenders, they have the ability to go forward just like wingers. They also have 6 world-class central midfield players and centre forwards. That makes a block of 6. And any team that plays against them has to be concerned about central penetration. And teams get so concerned about central penetration against the French, opens up these spaces for these outside backs to come into. And that is why they have been so successful. They're able to defend very well out of this shape. And although defending wasn't my topic, the flip side of the coin is that they're able to defend superbly and they're able to attack knowing when the ball turns over, they have safety in the middle of the field. Well, thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed this tape. I hope that your team is successful.